All right, and we will be getting going in about 30 seconds time. So for those who've not been on a Zoom meeting recently or Zoom webinar recently, we do have a Q&A portion, which will be at the end of the call. But for those who do have questions coming up, or who do have questions, excuse me, while the presentation is ongoing, feel free to go ahead and put those into the Q&A section, and then they'll be answered right at the end. All right, and good afternoon. So my name is Ian Paterson. I am the CEO of Plurilock. We are going to get started now. Today's conversation is really an extension of the initial conversation with Michael Campbell on Saturday. And so I know that quite a few of you were listening to that show, and you heard Michael Campbell's harrowing story of having his email hacked. That really prompted us to start the conversation around what individuals and business owners can do to keep themselves safe. We'll also cover a little bit, though, the rise of artificial intelligence and how that's impacting cybersecurity today. So we're going to explore that from a couple different angles. As we go through here, this information is just for information, or this presentation is for informational purposes only. Excuse me. Plurilock is publicly traded, so I'll just leave this on the screen for a minute. I'll give everybody a chance to screenshot this so that you can review this at your leisure. Who is this information for? Well, this webinar is for two sets of people. It is for people who use technology or for companies that use technology. So if you are in one of those two buckets, then this information is going to be for you. In terms of what we're going to cover today, we're going to really break this into two main sections. So the first is dealing a little bit more on the pure cybersecurity side of things. We're going to be talking about what are the cyber attacks that we at Plurilock are seeing out there in the wild. We're also going to touch upon some basic security hygiene for people and businesses to implement in order to stay safe. Then from there, we're going to switch and we're going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. What does that look like in practice? And then bring this all together. And really, we're going to start to talk about some of the opportunities that this new wave of AI is presenting, both for businesses as well as for investors. So again, we're gonna do a little bit of cybersecurity, a little bit of AI, and then we're gonna pull it all together. Now, I will say that at the end of this presentation, I will share a link to a cheat sheet, which effectively is all of the information contained in this presentation. So don't worry about taking notes. You can put the pencils down. There will be a download of that cheat sheet available. And that's just to allow everybody to be able to focus on the presentation, not have to worry about taking notes at the same time. So a little bit about myself, my background, and also Plurilock. So again, my name is Ian Paterson. I am the CEO of Plurilock. Plurilock is a cybersecurity and AI company. We sit at the intersection between those two industries. We are publicly traded, so we're listed on the TSX Venture Exchange under the ticker PLUR. Company today has well over 600 customers. We actually just recently reported our 2022 set of financials. We had $64 million of revenue. So for those who have followed our journey, you know that when we went public, right in the middle of COVID in September of 2020, at that time, we had approximately $500,000 of revenue. So we've definitely grown substantially over the last 2 to 3 years. And so part of that growth has been working with very selective customers. And as a result of that interaction and those engagements with those customers, it provides us a unique view in the cyber landscape. We tend to see a lot of the badness that takes place. And so with that insight, we are turning that around and ultimately able to provide some transparency. You are welcome to connect with me either on Twitter or LinkedIn. On the right is my LinkedIn profile, and then on the bottom left is my Twitter handle. So cybersecurity matters more than ever. Today, the average cost of a data breach is in the neighborhood of $5 to $10 million, depending on if you're in Canada or the United States. The estimate for cybercrime overall is well over $8 trillion, and these are all in US dollars. So this is as a function of the amount of money that bad guys are making. It is a big business for the bad guys to conduct cyber attacks because they can actually profit from it. And we'll see that when we dig into some of the cyber attacks coming up. In addition to the monetary damage from things like outages, as well as loss of reputation, when you suffer a cyber attack, you're also losing time taken away from working with your customers, time from having to repair, remediate, restore. And so the cyber attacks are both a cost in money, they're also a cost in time. Now, one of the things that business owners are sometimes surprised by is how much regulatory pressure is coming to actually enforce strong cyber defenses for businesses. And so we're seeing more and more that compliance is driving purchase behavior for cybersecurity solutions and defenses. Cybersecurity is paramount both for people, but especially for businesses. And so here is the quote from a former FBI director who said that there are two types of companies: those who know they have been hacked and those who will be. And I think that this just underscores how pervasive the cyber threat is that exists out there. So we'll talk about some of those threats that exist today. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is a list of cyber threats that we see common to businesses and to individuals. So we'll talk about some of the email attacks that we're seeing. We'll also talk about ransomware, SMS-based attacks, or what's sometimes called smishing attacks, and then we'll also talk about cryptojacking, or this is where bad guys use resources from a company in order to mine Bitcoin. So we'll dive into some of these specific attacks. What I would ask is if folks have examples of either examples of these types of attacks as we're going through and talking about them, or if you have suffered, or if you've seen businesses or peers who have suffered from other types of attacks, go ahead and put them in the Q&A or the chat function. Would love to understand what you folks are seeing out there in the wild as well. So we'll start here and we'll talk about an email and wire transfer type of message. This type of attack is sometimes called a business email compromise, a BEC. The way that it works is a bad guy will send a message and it will have varying degrees of authenticity. Sometimes it'll look like it's coming from somebody that you know. Sometimes it'll look like it's coming from somebody that you were actually expecting to get an email from. Practically speaking, the way that this attack works is the bad guys will ask to either send a new wire or perhaps actually change the bank details for an existing vendor that you work with or somebody that you're expecting to do a wire transfer to. We see this actually quite a bit in real estate. So right towards the end of a real estate transaction, we will see the bad guys use that timing to their advantage, and they'll try and insert themselves into the conversation and look to send a wire detail information right when you're expecting to receive it, and then ultimately, unbeknownst to you or to your finance department, you might end up sending money to somebody that you don't mean to. I will say, just from the practical side of things, this type of attack happens to companies at every scale. It doesn't matter if you're a small company, a medium-sized company, or a big company. these types of attacks happen regardless of size. And in some cases, smaller organizations are in some ways more susceptible because they are less likely to have robust processes in place to train and make aware their staff of how these types of attacks occur. So business email compromise, very, very common. Whether it's a wire transfer or some other form of transfer of value, we see this coming up quite frequently. Second type of common business attack is either SMS or smishing, or sometimes this is just referred to as gift card attacks. The way that this one works, and we see quite often, is the bad guys will look on LinkedIn, they'll look on Facebook, they'll try and find a new employee who's just started at an organization. If they can find somebody in the marketing department, even better. If they can find somebody in the marketing department who's more junior and who's brand new, these are great characteristics. The reason these are great characteristics is that a new person who is keen, they're not as experienced, they're not as innately suspicious, are more likely to just not know the norms or the practices of how the company works. And so they're more likely to fall prey to this type of attack. So what happens in this one is the bad guys they'll find a target, they will find their phone number, and they'll have an exchange similar to the one that's on the page right now. So they'll say, listen, it's the boss, it's the CEO, it's your supervisor, it's somebody above them in the organization, and they'll have some sort of story around, I can't get to my phone, I need you to send something. There's usually a high degree of urgency, like this has to happen right now, we're late, it's gotta be quick, and they'll try and move the conversation quickly to carry out that type of attack. What happens is that the employee or the junior marketing person, whoever it is, will either go buy gift cards in person, sometimes they'll buy them online, send the numbers to the bad guys, and as soon as that happens, then the damage is done. In some cases, the organization might not even know this type of attack has occurred until the employee goes to expense that purchase. And it's at that point that reconciliation gets made against what should have happened versus what actually happened, and then you discover that you have a problem. So in this case, it's crucial to really provide the training in place to have good processes where as you're onboarding particularly new staff, you explain how purchases happen, what levels of authorization are required, and you try and build in that suspicion as quickly as possible to organizational change, to new people joining the organization, to defend against these types of attacks. But this one happens very, very frequently, and certainly one to be on the lookout for. So we'll change now to the third common threat. This is ransomware. Most likely you've probably recall hearing about ransomware threats that have or attacks actually that have taken place over the last couple of years. Attacks like Colonial Pipeline, attacks like JBS Meats, they were in the news over the last couple of years for suffering large-scale ransomware attacks. Now, ransomware as a category of attack can mean a couple of things. It can mean that there is software that runs on devices that you control, and they encrypt data, and then they hold it for ransom, hence the name ransomware. What we are also seeing is forms of extortion where perhaps the data is not necessarily encrypted, but systems are inaccessible, or the bad guys will threaten to steal data and leak it unless a ransom is paid. So there's a couple different variations of what the threat is. We have seen some evolution over the last couple of years in terms of the types of groups who are conducting these campaigns and their specific modus operandi for how they operate. But the big picture here is that you have a sophisticated threat adversary There's some access that they gain to systems, whether that's data systems or whether that's in the Colonial Pipeline attack case, there were operational systems that they had access to, and there's some expectation or demand of payment in order for something bad to not happen. So ransomware is still happening. It has decreased a little bit in terms of the frequency. I'd say that we're seeing this turn up in the news. But for the Canadians amongst the audience, we have actually seen, even in industries like mining, healthcare, we've seen a lot of ransomware attacks that have occurred. So the defense against ransomware is more on the technology side. So this involves having strong cyber defenses deployed, operational, and working. So it's a little bit different than the last two types of attacks, which were more governance and process oriented to defend against. And in the case of ransomware, it's really about making sure that your systems are patched, that you have strong cyber defenses that are deployed, and preferably and ideally having some sort of managed security service that you are working with in order to have somebody who's actually monitoring for these types of attacks that take place. So ransomware decreasing a little bit in terms of what we see in the news, but certainly still a large threat. I'll talk now about cryptojacking. This one is a type of attack that the bad guys use to steal resources to mine cryptocurrencies, whether it's Bitcoin or some other flavor of cryptocurrency. Organizations that are a bit larger and have servers hosted in the cloud, whether that's Google Cloud, GCP, whether that's Amazon with AWS, or whether that's Microsoft with Azure, these cloud providers are all prime targets for cryptojacking attacks to occur. The reason being is that once you have access to an AWS or a GCP environment, it's designed to be able to rapidly spin up servers very, very quickly. And so in the case of Google, in 2021, Google actually published some research that saw that from the time a bad guy gets access to an environment, a cloud environment, to be able to do an attack, to the time that they actually monetize and execute their attack is about 22 seconds. So that's 22 seconds from the bad guys gaining access to starting to monetize and actually run their crypto mining. And this can lead to really significant bills. If you think about a server or two servers that might cost you $10, $20 a month, if you then think about what happens when you have 20,000 servers that are all started right at the same time as a result of a cryptojacking attack, it can really start to create a lot of cost for the business. So cryptojacking, even though the price of Bitcoin and the price of some of the alt currencies has decreased relative to where it was a couple of years ago, we are still seeing that this is a way that both organizations as well as certain governments are able to monetize their hacking through these types of attacks. So these are four types of attacks that we are seeing a lot of. Again, this is not exhaustive, but this does, I think this does touch upon some of the common attacks that businesses will come across, also as well as what some people will come across. If folks have other examples that we have not covered today of other types of attacks, go ahead and ask a question in the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to dig into some of that when we get to the Q&A portion. So we've talked now about the types of attacks, and this threat does definitely lead to investment in cybersecurity by businesses to defend against these types of attacks. One of the other things, though, that drives purchasing for cybersecurity software and services is compliance. So we touched upon that at the beginning part of the conversation. But I thought it'd be helpful just to list off some of the compliance drivers that businesses in particular are facing. So you can have risk from the cyber attacks. You can also have risk from complying with some of the items listed on the slide. So as a business, to get cyber insurance today, or to keep cyber insurance, it's quite common that you're going to have to show and provide proof of investing in a cybersecurity program. This means having strong passwords, having antivirus installed, etc. A couple of years ago, it was really straightforward to get cyber insurance. You didn't have to demonstrate too much about that. Now it's a lot harder to get it, and it's also a lot harder to keep cyber insurance as a business. So it's becoming increasingly more expensive. You have to do more things in order to get that insurance. We're also seeing examples of data privacy laws coming into multiple jurisdictions. So in Europe, you might be familiar with GDPR. In Canada, we have PIPEDA. In California, there is CCPA. These are all forms of data protection and privacy laws that are coming into place. And this now forces companies to have a higher level of defense when dealing with and safeguarding data. In the case of GDPR, the fines for getting this wrong can be very high. It can be up to, I believe it's 4% of revenue that a company can be fined. So there's real teeth to making sure that businesses stay safe and keep data safe. And this also is driving investment in cybersecurity. So if you're a business owner, or if you do business with large organizations, it's quite common that one or multiple of these things will apply to you, and so it's worth being aware of and familiar with. So it's impossible to give advice to everybody, because everybody's situation is different, whether you're a consumer, whether you're a business. But there are a couple of things that are true regardless of whether you're a person, you're a business, you're a big business, you're a small business. So we've listed 6 items here, which are practical steps to staying secure. This is the basics that apply to everybody. Obviously, there are more things to do depending on your situation, but everybody should be doing at least these things to start with. So the top 3 items are technology practice, or technology that you can put in place. You can and should have put in place. So things like having a good policy around your passwords. This could be using a password manager. This could be using an actual physical notebook, are actually really not bad, actually, in the grand scheme of things. But having strong and unique passwords, not reusing your passwords, and as needed, changing those passwords if you know that they have been compromised for some reason. This is crucial to defending against the threat adversaries that exist today. So passwords as a topic, key item. Second key item is around accounts. So one of the problems that exists is account sharing. And so having everybody have their own unique accounts, this is sort of similar to sharing passwords. Sharing accounts can be a risk. And so having those be separate will decrease that risk. There's an acronym here, which is called MFA. MFA stands for multi-factor authentication. And this is that second step of authentication. When you go to log into something, you have your MFA, and that either sends you a text message, or maybe you actually use your phone there we go. You actually use your phone to prove your identity. But having an additional step so that even if your password is compromised, there's what's called a defense in depth. I don't think I have any on my desk right now, but you can also get USB keys. They're called UBA keys. And that's something that you either plug into your computer, or you actually tap it against your phone as an additional factor of authentication. So regardless of which one you use, it's important to use something. And that actually goes for all of these 6 steps. You'll notice that we're not actually recommending any one specific piece of software. The important thing here is that you just use a piece of software somewhere rather than not doing it. So the first 3 are technology changes that you should be adopting. The next 3 are more governance changes. So with regards to updates, one of the ways that bad guys can get into systems is that they go after an old piece of software where there's a vulnerability that is well known, and they're able to attack and get into it. So by keeping software up to date, you're able to limit the effect of those old vulnerabilities. So again, that goes for your phone. Try and keep that up to date. That also goes for your laptops and your desktops and the desktops and software that you use inside your business. Number 5 is backups. So ransomware, even if it does occur, if you have backups of your data somewhere, the impact of that ransomware will be lessened. So you'll have more room to maneuver. So keeping your data backed up at all times. If you use something in the cloud, that's great. But try and have multiple copies of data so that you're not vulnerable in case one of those gets encrypted or lost or stolen or what have you. And then the last one is around privileged access or admin level access. And so try and minimize the amount of admin level access that you give out. If possible, on your own machine, it's actually ideal to not have admin level access, to have a lesser amount of privileges and only increase to an admin level when you really need it. Certainly in a business context, this is even more important. You don't actually want most of your employees to have admin level access. You want most of your employees to have a base level of access, and you only increase it to admin for a shortened amount of time or to do something specific, to conduct an action, etc. Because if you can limit the access, you have less likelihood that the bad guys will be able to get that level of access. So again, 6 practical steps to staying secure. We can bucket these into two groups. Again, we have technology steps to stay secure, and then we also have governance steps. This will be a bit of a plug here because what we do at Plurilock is actually we have both. There's really 2 parts to our business. We have a Plurilock AI software suite on the one hand of the business, and then we also have our solutions division on the other hand, which is more of a holistic solutions group, both in the United States and in Canada. So if you are a business owner or if you work inside a business and you're looking for some help, you're concerned about cybersecurity, would absolutely welcome the chance to connect and talk to you, whether it's using our Plurilock AI systems or whether we're helping more on the solutions side. We're happy to have that conversation. You might ask the question, when should you contact either Plurilock or someone else? So in terms of our software suite, Plurilock AI is really purpose-built for startups, small business, small to medium-sized enterprise, and enterprise. And we have hundreds of customers today across countries as well as across verticals. So we ultimately protect organizations in finance and healthcare, as well as unregulated industries like manufacturing. And we are really focused around customer satisfaction. So would love to talk to you about protecting your business using Plurilock AI. In terms of some of the services and solutions that we offer on the Plurilock Solutions Group side of the house, we can help you with things like penetration tests, cyber risk assessments, vulnerability scanning, managed services. So if any of those things apply, if you've got a pen test coming up, for instance, give us a shout, and we'd love to work with you. So that brings us, we're about halfway through now, and we have covered the current landscape, the current threat landscape around cybersecurity. The most common types of attacks that we are seeing, some base level knowledge about steps you can do today, both individually as well as from a business perspective, on how to stay safe. We're now going to shift gears and start to talk about AI. And then at the end of this conversation, we're going to bring this back to AI plus cybersecurity. So AI is next. We're going to talk about the new threats and the new needs that are occurring as a result of the influx of AI to the conversation. And I don't think that any of this is a surprise. But ChatGPT in particular has really kicked off a new arms race of AI tools that are proliferating into the market. So we saw that ChatGPT, as one example, as one tool, saw the fastest growth in terms of adoption to users. So on the left-hand side, we saw a comparison of the number of new users for ChatGPT as compared to Instagram, as compared to Spotify, as compared to Netflix. And you can see that the growth level is not linear, it's not even parabolic, it's basically a straight line going from 0 to a very large number in a very short amount of time. On the right-hand side, we saw a high number of news articles that were also publishing the fact that ChatGPT was just growing exceptionally quickly. So what we're seeing here is that AI is just taking the world by storm. It's a new technology, it's a new capability. So what does that mean? Well, AI could be the next gold rush. And what we saw with a lot of the past gold rush trends is that there were absolutely pickaxe and shovel opportunities that came along with them. So with the rise of AI and the growth of AI, there have certainly been problems along the way, security problems in particular. And we can ask the question, if those problems are large and the solutions to those problems are valuable, they could suggest investment opportunities. So we'll talk about two new problems that are occurring as a result of this growth of AI as it pertains to cybersecurity. So we're going to look at cybersecurity problems in the context of this new growth of AI. So problem number one is that we see just an absolutely incredible level of phishing or fake content being generated. So what we call deep fakes are these incredibly convincing live video, audio, and text imitations of people that we think that we know or think that we are familiar with. So celebrities. This could also be done though on the casual person. So AI is now allowing everybody, both good guys and bad guys, to be able to create very convincing video, voice, and text at scale. And the at scale part is crucial. Anybody can write an email and make it look like it's coming from somebody else. If you take enough time, you can study past emails that person has written, and you can try and make something that looks similar to them. That's not new. The thing that is new is that bad guys are now able to do this not for one person, but for hundreds or hundreds of thousands of people with relatively the same level of effort. And so what we're seeing is incredibly convincing deep fake capabilities that are able to be run at scale. And that is a concern. So companies, as we saw at the beginning part of this conversation, were already struggling with fake emails, with fake text messages that appeared convincing. They're able to convince people to do something, whether it's to wire money, whether it's to buy a gift card, etc. The question that you have to ask is, if bad guys are now able to do that on a Zoom call or on a video call or through a telephone call, how does that impact the cybersecurity threat landscape? And specifically, how can investors take advantage of that? So personally, I would be looking at this area. I think it's going to be a growing area. It's certainly a large problem. And even if you just look at a parallel, spam and phishing emails over the last 10 to 15 years have been a massive problem for both businesses and individuals. And so if you compare that then to this new iteration that this deep fake technology powered by AI is allowing both good guys and bad guys to be able to do, you have to ask the question, is there also going to be a massive problem with this new type of technology? And if so, for the companies who are able to solve it, it could present an opportunity. So that's the big problem number one. Big problem number two is actually the privacy implication of working with products like ChatGPT. Now, to be clear, ChatGPT is one form of what's called a large language model, an LLM. So an LLM is the underlying technology. ChatGPT is not the only LLM. There's Bard. Microsoft and Google both have their own flavors of LLMs, but we'll just use ChatGPT as one example because it's been in the news quite a bit. And we'll see here that there are some news headlines that are concerning. So with ChatGPT, what has been found to happen in practice is that people, whether they're employees or consumers, may be pasting in or writing in data that is considered confidential or secret in some way. We saw the case where Samsung in particular actually has banned the use of ChatGPT after an employee accidentally leaked sensitive data into ChatGPT. So we saw this not only with Samsung, other companies have also announced their concerns about the use of this type of technology. We've seen reports from Walmart, we've seen reports from JP Morgan and other very large enterprises that are concerned about the use of AI and the privacy implications that come from that use. Now, it's not only the companies themselves, but it's also regulators. So there have been a number of jurisdictions, Canada being one, that are very concerned about the privacy impacts of data getting leaked as a result of the use of ChatGPT and similar large language models. We saw that Italy actually banned ChatGPT for a period of time because of their concerns around privacy. So the second problem here is that companies in particular are struggling to protect their private data. And AI could be a productivity boon for companies, but the trick is how to do so in a way that is privacy friendly, that doesn't actually create risk, but how can you use AI safely without incurring that risk? That seems to be an opportunity for the company that is able to solve that. Now, you might ask the question, well, who is Plurilock and why are they talking about AI? And what I would tell you is that Plurilock was actually founded on AI. And so Plurilock, just as a bit of a background, we started life as a software company, and we have the ability to recognize people based on their keystroke and mouse movement behavior. That type of AI is called behavioral biometrics. And this is our patented software that we launched and ultimately took public. So our position in the industry is that we are both helping companies solve cybersecurity problems. We are doing so using our own flavor of AI. And we're watching as this new wave, this new recognition of AI is coming into the industry. So what is our response to these new AI problems? What I would say is this. We believe that the future of cybersecurity is in AI. We continue to invest in research and development. And I would tell you to stay tuned and watch this space. So that concludes the formal part of the presentation. We actually had quite a few questions that popped in during the presentation. I'm just looking at this list right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and start addressing some of these questions that have already come in. I'd certainly encourage if there was something that we did not cover during the conversation, I'd encourage you to go ahead and put that into the Q&A section now, and we'll try and get through as many of these as possible. So So question number one, so in regards to software updates, so that was our number 4 on our list of things to do. Should older Windows OSs be updated to Windows 11? So thank you for that question. I would say that absolutely try and update as much as you can, as often as you can. In some cases, there might be multiple versions of Windows that are being updated at the same time. So it's actually quite common that when you have a new version of Windows, like Windows 11, Microsoft will also continue to update the old version as well, Windows 10, up until a certain point. If you're still running Windows 3.11 or Windows 95 or Windows 98, those are out of support. They no longer are providing security fixes. So at that point, then you actually would want to update to a newer, more modern Windows OS. But if you're on the current version or one version behind, you can usually count that just updating those to the current version of Windows 10 will be sufficient. Obviously, over time, you want to upgrade to Windows 11. And by the way, that's true not only of Windows, that's also true if you have an iPhone, if you have an Android. The same theory applies. So try and keep those systems up to date as much as you possibly can. If things are really old, like you're running Windows 95, Windows 98, upgrade those to a newer version of Windows because they are out of support, and you need to get those updated. So thank you for that question. So that was a great question. Next question. Will a video recording of today's presentation be made available? The answer is yes. So you'll have not only the video recording. So for those who did arrive late, I think we had quite a few people who actually arrived a bit late. We will send you as a follow-up a copy of the video recording. The other thing, and the link is actually right here on the screen. So we published a cheat sheet, which is the recommendations as well as the common threats that we see. It's in a 2-page download. And if you go to plurilock.com/cheat sheet, you can fill out a form, you can sign up, and you can actually get a copy of that cheat sheet. And so again, just as a reminder, these are things that both consumers need to do as well as businesses. It's not exhaustive, it's not all you need to do, but it's definitely a step up if you're not doing anything today. So we will send you the recording, and there is a cheat sheet available. Question has also came in here. How safe are password managers? I worry that they could be hacked. Could you recommend a good password manager? So really good question. So password managers are a bit of a trade-off. And so you're trading off hopefully a unique password everywhere against the risk that you've centralized all of your passwords in one spot. The alternative is you don't use any passwords, that you don't use any password manager, but you might have the same password that you use everywhere. What the industry has come to a consensus on is that it is better to centralize your risk, have all of your passwords in one password manager, but have unique passwords for every site you do. That is better than having no password manager, but reusing the same password everywhere. That example where it's one password, you use the same thing, you use it everywhere, that is being exploited by bad guys left, right, and center. They're called password stuffing attacks. And the way that it works is you have one password, let's say you use it on Dropbox. If Dropbox gets hacked and your password then is stolen by the bad guys will actually use that password and they'll try every other service. They'll try Windows, Microsoft Office 365. They'll try Facebook. They'll try Salesforce.com. So they'll use that stolen password and they'll access your other accounts. So that's why it's better to have some sort of password manager rather than just reusing the same password. Now, to your question about which password manager to recommend, unfortunately, that depends. Typically, when we're dealing with businesses, the specific technology recommendation, whether it's 1Password or LastPass or what have you, is going to depend on the environment that you're in and the specific risks that you have. So it's difficult to give a product recommendation. Although certainly if you have if you're a business owner and you're running a business and you're looking for some advice, go ahead and send us an email, sales@plurilock.com, and we can help you with that. We can help you with that question. Question: is it dangerous to use DocuSign through your work? So good question. So that's an interesting question, actually, because DocuSign, there's nothing that I know of that's inherently good or bad about DocuSign as compared to DropSign or HelloSign or any of the other DocuSign options that are available. But because DocuSign is so popular, DocuSign phishing emails are also quite common. So I mean, we don't use DocuSign, but I still get 3 or 4 DocuSign phishing emails a day with bad guys trying to convince me to click on a DocuSign email. So that definitely happens. I think that the key there is to provide the training and awareness to your staff to say that we do use DocuSign, and therefore be extra careful when you're receiving a DocuSign email. You might actually want to do something where you standardize and say DocuSigns will only come from this one person, and then give your employees the steps to check and verify how to ascertain whether an email is genuine or fraudulent. So I would put some governance around that technology decision that you've made. Use DocuSign, but then put some governance around it to make sure that you have the processes necessary to use it safely. Okay, question. At what point do you contact law enforcement or the police after being hacked? Very good question. So if you are subject to some type of cyber attack, whether you've been hacked, whether your business has been attacked, usually earlier is better in that case. If you're a business, though, the sequence that you want to go through depends a little bit on your business. So it's quite common, actually, that either your law firm or your insurance provider might be your first call, because they will actually want to coordinate and be either the breach coach or think of them as the quarterback to work through that incident. So it's not necessarily wrong to call law enforcement first, but in a business setting, you typically will have steps that you want to follow in a certain sequence to be the most organized. So you might actually need to start with your insurance provider, with your law firm. Now, you don't want to figure that out when you have been hacked. You want to try and do that ahead of time. And so that's where things like cybersecurity preparedness training or tabletop exercises can be really helpful. Those are 2 things that we offer at Plurilock. And so I know that that has provided a lot of peace of mind to the businesses that we've worked with, to know in advance, if something happens, who do I call, what do I do, and then have that plan in place. But very good question. What you don't want to do is you don't want to just not talk to law enforcement. If you've had particularly if you've had a significant hack or data breach, you might actually have obligations to contact your authorities having jurisdiction, your AHJs, whether that's law enforcement, whether that's other potentially a regulatory body. You might be required to talk to these organizations, and again, that differs on a case-by-case basis. Okay. Question regarding virus protection: are Apple products immune, or do they need protection as well? Good question. So what I would say is that Apple products historically have not had as many viruses, but viruses are no longer the main thing to be concerned about. There's a term in the cybersecurity industry that identity is the new perimeter, and this means effectively that the types of threats and attacks that are taking place are targeting people's identity. They're not necessarily targeting your desktop. Now, that's not to say that desktop threats don't exist. They certainly do. And so you absolutely can buy and should buy what's called endpoint protection, so EPP. So it used to be called antivirus. Now, because of the types of threats that exist, you've got viruses, you've got malware, you've got ransomware, et cetera. The industry term is endpoint protection. So you certainly do want to purchase EPP for your Apple desktops as well as your Mac desktops. Again, if you're in a business setting, you may actually be required to purchase this to maintain your insurance. Or if you have a NIST or ISO standard that you're trying to comply with, like NIST 851 or NIST 853, ISO 27001, these are common cybersecurity standards. Again, you might be required to have that in place. So unfortunately, just because you have a Mac does not mean you can skip it. But very good question. Question, do you provide cybersecurity for individuals? It's a good question. So Plurilock today does not provide much in the way of individuals. There's a little bit of an asterisk there. In some cases, individuals, if you're a VIP, if you're a celebrity, if you're somebody who sort of behaves almost like a business because you have a lot of assets, or you are subject to a situation where you might have a lot of threats, there are some things that we can do. So generally speaking, no. If you feel that the economics to you are worth it to invest some resources, potentially. So you're welcome to shoot me an email, Ian, IAN at plurilock.com, or sales@plurilock.com. If we're able to help, we're happy to do so. I'm just going to go through here. We've still got quite a few questions. So question, I have received emails from a contact in regards to a sports team from years ago. The emails go to junk. The emails contain a link that I have not clicked on. Is deleting those emails the only thing to do? Generally, yes. What you can do in most email, like Gmail or Office 365, Microsoft 365, there's usually a function where you can mark an email as either as spam or as phishing. And so it does help a little bit to mark those things as phishing, because you're basically training the system. You're training actually a form of AI to recognize that these are nefarious emails and don't show me more of these emails in the future. That's what you're trying to do. Practically speaking, it's not always foolproof, but that is something that you can do. So you can delete it, you can mark it as phishing, and that'll do a little bit to help prevent those emails in the future. Really good questions. We've got a few more minutes here, so I'll try and get through as many questions as possible. Questions on the use of VPNs for individuals. So good question. Most cases, you do not benefit from having a VPN in most cases. If you are using a modern email like Gmail or Microsoft 365 or your work email, there's not really a benefit in using a VPN. VPNs are really only useful if you're running really old software that does not have encryption by default. In that case, you can have a little bit of a benefit, but even for businesses, VPNs are a bit falling out of favor as compared to just having everything encrypted all the time. So there's definitely a ton of marketing that takes place, marketing VPNs to individuals. I personally don't use them. Most cyber practitioners that I know don't use them. And so they're very limited. The only time where a VPN can sometimes be helpful is if you're traveling, for instance, and you want to appear like you're in your home country. Having a VPN kind of provides some benefit in that regards. You can appear like you're in a different location than you are. But generally speaking, not a huge benefit, and in fact, not really a good use of, in my experience, not a good use of dollars to buy VPNs for consumers. Question, for anonymity, do you have a preference between DuckDuckGo and startpage.com? So the question is around browsing anonymity, DuckDuckGo versus startpage.com. It's tricky because there's different levels of anonymity. So DuckDuckGo is a search engine similar to Google, but it's advertised as being a more anonymous search engine. In practice, there are other ways of being tracked than just the search engine that you're using. So what browser you use, for instance, and what browser extensions you have installed, if any, can also track and so work against the anonymity desire. So to actually browse anonymously you need to not only just use a more anonymous search engine, you typically need a whole software stack, meaning different browser, meaning making sure you don't have other trackers installed on your desktop. So there's a lot that actually goes into accomplishing that goal. Now, strictly to your question, is DuckDuckGo more anonymous than Google? Hard to say. DuckDuckGo, I think, has marketed itself as being more anonymous. And so you would want to do your own homework in terms of whether you agree with the claims that they are making. And if so, then that might be a great fit for you. But unfortunately, it's a more nuanced conversation than simply use this product versus this other product. By the way, that's part of the reason why cybersecurity, just as an industry, is so hard, and typically companies need expert advisors like Plurilock to be able to navigate it safely, because a lot of these questions are not clear cut. The answer is it depends in a lot of cases, and you need to do some homework. So very good question. I think I'm just going through, I think I've answered a good chunk of these. I'm just kind of go earlier up to some of the earlier questions. So question in regards to Facebook. So recently my Facebook was hacked. I'm sorry to hear that. Before I could reset the password, the hacker had added another email and phone number for the two-factor authentication. So it was hopeless to change it. Any suggestions? Facebook offers no assistance unless you were able to reset your password. Unfortunately, your story is not unique. This is, a lot of cybersecurity is preventative. My understanding is with regards to Facebook, I'd have to check to see what their current reset procedures are. But in some cases, you are able to send in some personally identifiable information, like driver's license, etc. It depends a little bit on the jurisdiction that you're in, and what historically you have set up on your account. So without knowing more details, my recommendation would be to maybe just do a little bit of research around what the current situation is. I would check Reddit around the account lockout and password reset procedures, and see if there are any additional options for the region that you're in. I'm assuming that you're in Canada, the United States, but again, that's going to differ depending on what country you're in. Okay, I'm going to mark that off. We've probably got time for another one or two more questions. So for those who do have them, go ahead and enter them into the Q&A section. All right, so next question. In terms of home PC, what do I do when I realize I have been infected and maybe my friends' email accounts have been sent dangerous emails? How do I stop the bleeding and recover? So unfortunately, good question. Just because your friends have received emails that are malicious does not necessarily mean your computer, your home PC or your home Mac has been infected. It's possible that it was simply a link that you clicked on and that your email might be compromised, but not necessarily your home desktop. So that's the first thing. Again, we come back to that it depends answer. Generally, what I would recommend is in that sort of situation, try and get out ahead of it. So let your contacts know what has happened. Change your email passwords. Certainly use this as an opportunity to update your home PCs and try and prevent the spread of access to anything else. So what I mean by that is, if one account is compromised, try and make sure that the rest of the accounts, like your other email accounts or your utilities accounts or banking accounts, etc., that they're not also at risk of being compromised. So when I say at risk, what I mean is if you've used the same password across multiple services, that's definitely an indication that you should change that password immediately, and ideally use a different password for each service. But otherwise, try and get out ahead of it, and try and notify people ahead of time, saying, "Listen, you may have received something. Maybe it went into spam. Maybe it didn't, but it wasn't me." And try and do that on a different communication medium. So if it's an email that was sent out, try and text people or call people and try and let them know. So unfortunately, that we're actually running a few minutes over schedule. So I know that there's a couple of other questions that I was not able to answer. More than happy to carry on the conversation. Again, would encourage everybody to download the cheat sheet. So plurilock.com/cheat sheet. We will also send a follow-up with the details of the recording. Would also welcome folks to stay connected with us by signing up to our investor relations mailing list. And beyond that, thank you very much for spending the hour. Thank you for attending to begin with. Thank you for spending the full hour. We actually had over hundreds, I think well over 100 anyway, participants. So it was a pleasure to connect and speak with you, and look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you.